It wasn't the bark that warned him. It was the silence. And that silence saved his life. At 10:42 a.m. on a calm Tuesday morning, Logan Reed took a sip from his Sketch It, Build It, Repeat mug and stared out the kitchen window. Sunlight shimmered across his neatly mowed lawn. The smell of freshly ground coffee lingered in the air. Nothing about that moment felt unusual, until it did. Axel, his retired canine German Shepherd Malinois mix, was stretched out in his usual post by the front door. Normally, the big dog snored softly or twitched a paw in sleep, but today he was upright, ears rigid, muscles tense, his amber eyes locked on the doorknob like it owed him money. Logan froze. He muted the lo-fi jazz on his Bluetooth speaker and listened. At first he heard nothing. Then came a faint scraping sound, like a boot dragging across dry concrete, a sound you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. Logan crept to the window, parted the blinds slightly, and peeked out. Nobody, no cars, no delivery vans, not even a kid on a bike, just the trash bin by the curb and the same cracked sidewalk he walked Axel on every morning. But the tension in Axel's posture didn't ease. That's when it hit Logan. This wasn't just alertness. This was calculation. Axel wasn't just awake, he was preparing. Logan backed away from the window, uneasy but still unsure why. His phone was on the counter. Maybe he should call. Boom! The door didn't knock. It exploded. The wood frame shattered like a dry twig. Hinges screamed. A wall of sound and splinters blasted into the hallway. Logan was thrown backward onto the floor. Two men charged inside. Fast, controlled, wearing navy blue windbreakers with blocky white letters, Neighborhood Enforcement. They didn't identify themselves, didn't ask questions, just acted. The taller one barked, "Step away from the dog!" The other scanned the hallway with gloved hands and a radio clipped to his shoulder. He wore a plastic badge that glinted off-center. Logan's heart slammed against his ribs. His voice caught in his throat. "What the hell is this? I don't even live in an HOA!" The taller man pushed him to the ground, hard. Axel didn't bark. He didn't move. He simply stared, still and silent like a fuse that hadn't been lit. Yet. Logan Reed had worked hard for this quiet life. After 10 years of freelance architecture and 3 tours as a military engineering officer, he chose this cul-de-sac in northern Arizona for a reason. Peace. No HOA rules. No nosy neighbors. Just long mornings designing custom homes and long walks with the dog who saved his life overseas. He thought he had left behind the chaos, but chaos had just kicked in his front door. And Axel? He was waiting. Watching. Not growling. Not lunging. Assessing. You see, Axel had been trained not just to bite, but to judge. He didn't attack unless a line was crossed. His silence wasn't fear. It was strategy. The first man grabbed Logan by the collar and dragged him partially upright. "You're in violation of Municipal Code 17A, he snapped. "Unauthorized structure beyond your perimeter fencing." Logan was still too dazed to argue. But that didn't make sense. What code? What perimeter? He hadn't built anything. That's when he noticed the badge. Not metal, not embossed, not even straight, just plastic, like a toy badge from a hardware store. His vision cleared, his pulse spiked. These weren't real officials. This was a setup, and they had no idea what was standing 5 feet behind them. Just then, Axel moved. Not a leap, not a charge. Just a shift in weight, subtle but full of intent. Logan locked eyes with him. No commands were needed. Axel had been trained to decide for himself, and his decision had been made the moment Logan hit the floor. The first man reached for something on his belt. Maybe pepper spray, maybe worse. Axel struck. Not wildly, not like a pet protecting its owner. Like a missile, the hallway echoed with a deep, guttural roar, one that lived somewhere between instinct and war. It wasn't a bark. It was a warning, a final one. Then came the impact. 175 pounds of disciplined muscle collided with the intruder like a wrecking ball. The man screamed, a mix of pain and terror, as Axel pinned him against the wall, teeth clamped down on his forearm in perfect, deliberate control. "Get him off me!" he shrieked. The second man froze. His eyes darted from the badge on his chest to the dog on his partner. He hesitated, weighed his odds. Then he bolted, out the front door, down the sidewalk, vanishing behind a neighbor's hedge without a word. Logan crawled to his feet, heart thudding like a jackhammer. His body trembled, but his mind was clear now. He moved carefully to Axel, placed a hand on his back, and whispered, "Axel, back!" For the first time since the door blew open, the dog responded. He released the arm slowly, calmly, standing over the man without stepping away, still watching, still ready. Logan looked down at the intruder. The man's windbreaker sleeve was soaked in blood. His plastic badge had snapped in half. His radio crackled uselessly on the floor. "You picked the wrong house," Logan said, low and even. "If you believe dogs like Axel deserve more recognition, hit that subscribe button and join us at Heroes for Animals. We share powerful stories of real canine courage you'll never forget." The sirens didn't come for 11 more minutes. By the time the real officers arrived, Logan had taken over a dozen pictures. The shattered door frame, the badge, the blood trail on the tiles. He even recorded a short clip of the man groaning on the floor. What he didn't expect was the look on the officers' faces when they stepped inside. No shock, no anger, just hesitation. One of them, older, clean-shaven, asked calmly, "Do you have any firearms in the house, sir?" Logan blinked. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just for the report," another officer added. "Has the dog ever shown aggression before?" Logan stared, dumbfounded. "Are you kidding me? He saved me. He was defending me." That's when Logan saw it. A glance, just a flicker between the two officers. Recognition. They'd seen this before. The man on the floor whimpered softly as the paramedics lifted him onto the stretcher. His windbreaker, ripped at the seam and stained with blood, flashed the fading letters, "Neighborhood Enforcement." His plastic badge lay in a Ziploc bag on Logan's kitchen counter, bent in half like a soda lid. Axel stood off to the side, calm now, composed, like a soldier who had done his job and was waiting for orders. His tail didn't wag, his ears didn't flick. He simply watched the scene unfold with quiet alertness, a sentinel in fur. Logan leaned against the wall near the coffee bar, arms crossed, every muscle in his body tight. He was still barefoot, still had a scrape on his elbow from where he hit the floor, but his eyes were clear. He had questions, and nobody seemed interested in giving answers. Officer Trent, the older of the two responding cops, sat at Logan's kitchen table flipping through his notepad. "So let's walk it back," he said. "You said they kicked in the door with no warning?" Logan stared at him. "Do you see a broken door lying in my hallway? That answer your question?" The officer didn't flinch, just scribbled something down. "And the man on the floor, he's the one who pushed you?" "Yes, threw me to this ground, claimed I was violating HOA Code 17A or something." "Do you live in an HOA?" Trent asked, without looking up. "No, that's why I bought this house. No board, no dues, no rules about the color of my mailbox or how tall my grass is." "Right," Trent murmured. Then, as casually as if asking about the weather, "Has your dog ever bitten anyone before?" Logan blinked. "Are you serious? He's a retired K9. He doesn't bark at mailmen. He doesn't chase squirrels. He defends when it counts and only when it counts." Trent nodded slowly. "Okay, just checking." Logan exhaled sharply. "Why do I feel like I'm being treated like a suspect here?" The younger officer, Morales, stepped in. "You're not. We're just trying to piece together what this guy and his partner were doing here. It's weird. We've seen those jackets before, but not in this neighborhood." Logan raised an eyebrow. "So they've done this before?" The room went quiet for a second longer than it should have. "Not exactly here," Trent admitted. "But yeah, we've had reports in the next subdivision over. Same jackets, same compliance story. Usually people just answer the door and they leave a warning tag. Never seen them force their way in like this." Logan's voice dropped. "You ever arrest them?" Trent hesitated. "Hard to arrest someone when they're acting under a gray area." "A gray area?" Logan snapped. "They impersonated officials. They broke into my house. They could have killed me. They almost got themselves killed." Axel let out a soft huff, as if backing up his owner's statement. By noon, the stretcher was gone. The second intruder, the one who ran, was still unaccounted for. Axel had curled up in the living room, his head resting on his paws, though his eyes remained half open. Logan opened his laptop and began backing up every security camera clip he had. One above the garage caught the men walking up the driveway, their body language already aggressive. One in the hallway showed the moment the door splintered inward. He took screenshots, uploaded everything to a folder labeled "Break-in Evidence," and started typing a timeline for his lawyer. Still, something nagged at him. How had these guys known when he'd be home alone? And who the hell was Carl? Later that night, after patching up the door with plywood and duct tape, Logan played back his voicemail messages. One stood out, time-stamped at 9:16 a.m., a full hour before the break-in. A man's voice, calm and low. "Hey, we're heading over to that guy's place now. Shouldn't take long. Door's probably locked, but we'll handle it. Carl said he wants it dealt with before the meeting." Logan froze. He played it again, slower. "Carl said he wants it dealt with before the meeting." He didn't know anyone named Carl. Not a neighbor, not a city official. But the tone was clear. This wasn't an error. This was deliberate. They weren't confused about the address. They were targeting him. He saved the voicemail under the file name, Premeditated MP3. The next day, Logan drove to the county recorder's office and pulled property maps. His house, as expected, fell outside all local HOA jurisdictions. But just a few blocks over, there was a development called Whisper Pines, managed by a particularly aggressive HOA known for strict visual codes. He made a few calls, spoke with 3 different neighbors, all of whom had heard of a compliance advisory team that went around leaving citations. "It's not official," one woman whispered. "Just a few guys who think they're saving the neighborhood." Another added, "They call themselves visual standard officers or something stupid like that. They handed out flyers a year ago, said they were helping enforce aesthetic balance." Whatever that means. Logan felt sick. Aesthetic balance? They kicked in his door over a shed he built behind a privacy fence. He contacted Whisper Pines HOA directly. A woman named Ruth answered, polite, professional, but clearly shaken when he explained what happened. I'm so sorry, Mr. Reed. That's absolutely not us. We've never authorized any enforcement beyond our community border. In fact, we issued a cease and desist order to that team last spring." "So you know who they are?" "They were just residents. A few committee members who took things too far. They stopped acting on our behalf months ago." Logan paused. "Do you know a man named Carl?" Ruth didn't answer immediately. Then, in a quiet voice, "Carl Densmore. He used to chair the beautification committee. He moved out last year, but I think some of his friends kept the project going." Logan closed his eyes. This wasn't just rogue enforcement. It was a vigilante HOA, and they had come to his house believing they were still in charge. That evening, Logan walked out to the edge of his property with Axel at his side. The plywood still covered the front door. The lock was shattered. The security lights now stayed on all night. But Axel didn't seem shaken. He never barked again, just stayed close, quietly doing his job. Logan squatted beside him and scratched behind his ears. "You didn't just save me," he whispered. "You reminded me how quickly things can fall apart." Axel nudged his hand gently, a silent yes. Back inside, Logan did something he never thought he'd do. He posted about it, not for sympathy, for awareness. He didn't name names, didn't show the voicemail, just a brief caption above a still frame from the hallway camera, right before the door exploded. "They wore fake uniforms. They faked a badge. They called it code enforcement. But my dog knew better." He waited in silence, and when the time came, he didn't hesitate. The post spread fast. By the time the weekend came, Logan had already gotten a call from a local news station and a podcast invitation from a retired sheriff's group. But he didn't care about clicks. He wanted accountability. And someone, Carl or whoever followed him, was going to find out that this time they picked the wrong house, with the wrong dog, because Axel didn't need a badge. He just needed a reason, and he'd already decided. 3 days after the break-in, Logan stood in front of a courtroom door that looked less secure than his front porch. Faded carpet, peeling baseboards, and a coffee machine that hadn't worked in decades. Somehow, this was the place where it all came down. He looked down at Axel, calm, poised, sitting by his side in a tactical service vest marked Retired K9. The courtroom bailiff had initially hesitated about letting a dog inside. Then Axel looked him dead in the eye, and the bailiff stepped aside. Logan took a deep breath and entered. Across the aisle, the man who had kicked in Logan's door sat slouched in a charcoal gray suit, his arm in a sling, his expression carefully neutral, clean-shaven, a polite haircut, not a single thread out of place. He looked less like a thug and more like someone's accountant. It was jarring. Logan knew the kind. Smooth talkers who cleaned up well when consequences loomed. The man didn't glance at Logan. He just leaned over to whisper to his attorney, then sat perfectly still. No cast, no crutches, just that damn sling and a courtroom full of questions. The second man, the runner, was nowhere to be found. Logan's lawyer, James Rohr, had the voice of a man who never rushed. Mid-50s, sharp suit, wireframe glasses. He didn't interrupt, didn't object for sport, just watched, measured, moved with surgical intent. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense haircut and a voice like gravel, called the room to order. What followed was 90 minutes of slow, strategic unraveling. The opposing attorney, a stiff-looking man from Scottsdale, tried to paint the intruder as a misunderstood compliance officer who had acted in good faith under a neighborhood advisory initiative. Logan didn't flinch. He'd expected that angle. They claimed Logan's backyard shed violated visual code guidelines, that the man had been encouraged by local residents to issue citations, that Axel's actions were excessive, bordering on dangerous. Rohr never raised his voice, just waited. Then he dropped the exhibits, one by one. First, photos of the broken door, the bent lock, the blood trail. Second, footage from Logan's garage and hallway security cams, showing the men's approach, the fake windbreakers, the silent entry, the violent shove. Third, close-up shots of the badge, off-center lettering, no government seal, a barcode sticker still visible on the back. Fourth, Axel's full military K-9 record, certifications, deployment logs, temperament assessments, a flawless record. Fifth, a letter from Whisper Pines HOA, signed and sealed, confirming that no enforcement personnel were authorized to enter Logan's home or any home outside their neighborhood. Finally, the voicemail, time-stamped, crystal clear. We're heading over to that guy's place now. Carl said he wants it dealt with before the meeting. The courtroom went so quiet you could hear the judge's pen stop scratching her legal pad. Logan didn't look at the defendant. He didn't have to. The man wasn't just squirming in his seat anymore, he was shrinking. Outside the courthouse during recess, Logan stood on the sidewalk while Axel lay by his boots, chewing a beef-flavored rubber bone someone had given him as a peace offering. A small crowd had gathered across the street, neighbors, local reporters, even a retired deputy who shook Logan's hand and said, "Good dog." Logan nodded. "Best partner I've ever had." When the session resumed, the judge barely looked up as she read the verdict. Felony trespass, impersonation of a public officer, unlawful forced entry. The defendant is liable for full restitution of property damages and court costs. Additionally, this court recommends follow-up with county prosecutors regarding criminal proceedings. The gavel cracked, just once, and it was over. Logan didn't celebrate. He didn't fist pump or post a TikTok or tag a photo with "Nad justice served." He walked out of that courtroom with Axel at his side and silence in his chest. Not because it didn't matter, but because it did. Too much. Because what almost happened in his living room that day hadn't come down to laws or judges. It had come down to instincts. His dog had known before anyone else. That night, Logan stood in his garage staring at the plywood still covering the front door. He thought about replacing it, then thought better of it. Instead, he upgraded everything. Steel core door, reinforced frame, 3-layer deadbolt, motion sensors, a new wireless system with triple cloud backup and hard drive redundancy. He didn't do it out of fear. He did it out of principle. Because what shook him most wasn't the broken door or even the plastic badge. It was how close it had come to working. If Axel hadn't been there, if Logan had been distracted, if he'd opened the door willingly, he might have been robbed, or worse. And the badge, that plastic piece of garbage, it almost fooled him. Almost. 2 days later, Logan got a call from someone at the local sheriff's office. The second man, the runner, had never been charged. Apparently, there wasn't enough evidence to ID him from the footage, and no one had filed a complaint in the past. The guy had simply vanished. Logan hung up without saying much, then walked out to the backyard where Axel was sprawled under the shade of a maple tree, tongue out, tail sweeping dust across the grass. Logan tossed him a steak tip. Axel caught it midair. The story didn't stay quiet for long. Within a week, regional news outlets had picked it up. Headlines spread online like wildfire. Retired K-9 foils break-in by fake officials. Homeowner turns the tables on security scam. Dog named Axel exposes rogue HOA vigilantes. Local forums lit up. People from other neighborhoods began sharing their own stories. Warning notices left on doors. Strangers knocking in the early morning hours. Jackets with vague lettering. A podcaster reached out. A retired SWAT commander turned host of a show called Truth in Tactics. Logan agreed to do the interview on one condition. Axel came too. The episode dropped 2 days later. The host asked, "What do you say to people who think your dog overreacted?" Logan smiled. I say those people weren't the ones shoved to the floor by men with fake authority. Then the host turned to Axel, sitting proudly by Logan's side. That's not just a guard dog, he laughed. That's a furry lawsuit with teeth. The clip went viral, but Logan didn't care about the attention. He wasn't in it for the headlines. What stuck with him wasn't the press, it was the principle. How a uniform, or something designed to look like one, could override logic. How quickly the human brain would accept boldness as authority. How danger could walk through your front door wearing a lie. And how trust, in people, in systems, could break faster than any doorframe. But Axel never broke. He waited, he judged, and he acted with conviction. 1 month after the verdict, Logan sold the house, packed everything he owned into a U-Haul, moved just outside town, past the city limits, into a rural patch of land with tall trees, long gravel roads, and no HOA in sight. He built a new shed, twice the size, and placed Axel's bed by a massive window overlooking a private acre. Cameras watched every angle, locks on every door. Security, real security, was now defined by 2 things: steel, and a dog who didn't need orders to know who didn't belong. Logan never thought he'd be back in a courtroom. Not this soon, not for this. He sat near the back row, blazer clean, boots polished, and Axel lying quietly at his feet. This time wasn't about prosecution. It was about something bigger: precedent. The civil hearing wasn't televised, but Logan could feel the tension the moment the judge walked in. There was no jury, just paperwork, attorneys, and the question every neighbor should have been asking weeks ago: how did this happen in the first place? The Compliance Advisory Team, as they had called themselves, was officially disbanded. The HOA board at Whisper Pines had submitted a formal apology, but the hearing today would determine liability. Not just for the man who kicked in Logan's door, but for the people who let it happen. Documents revealed that a rogue team had operated in a legal blind spot for nearly 18 months. They weren't paid employees. They weren't credentialed, but they were endorsed. Quietly, repeatedly. Emails submitted into evidence showed internal discussions between HOA committee members and the so-called team. We should have Carl's guys do another round of checks before the spring walkthrough. That gray house down on Banner Drive is really ruining the uniformity. They've got a dog, better bring backup. Logan's fists clenched under the table. His name hadn't been listed, but the tone was clear. They weren't trying to help. They were trying to control. The attorney representing the HOA, a corporate type in expensive heels, argued that the committee members had acted without full knowledge of the group's tactics, and that the organization had never officially endorsed physical enforcement. But when the judge read out the list of property visits logged by the team, including 10 homes outside their jurisdiction, her tone shifted. "You cannot pretend to wear a badge and call it community service," she said. "And when someone gets hurt, silence becomes complicity." Axel stirred at Logan's feet as if he understood, because Axel had been there for every second of it. And now he was watching justice take shape, slowly, but finally. After the hearing, Logan stepped outside into the crisp morning air. A few reporters tried to intercept him. "Mr. Reed, do you feel the HOA should face criminal charges?" one asked. Logan didn't answer right away. He looked down at Axel, then back at the mic. "I think people should stop underestimating what can happen when you give the wrong person a clipboard, a logo, and a sense of power." He turned and walked away. That evening, Logan sat on his back porch, watching the sky fade into orange over the pines. He sipped a cold beer and tossed Axel a rib bone from the grill. The property was quiet. No foot traffic, no teenagers on bikes, no random HOA reps with clipboards peeking over fences. Just the creak of a wind chime and the sound of Axel's paws padding across the deck. Logan had added motion lights, camera sensors, and gravel under every window. Not out of fear, but because of how easy it had been to breach trust. That badge, it still haunted him. A fake plastic thing that had almost fooled his instincts. Almost. 2 weeks later, Logan got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single photo. Grainy, blurry, printed from a cheap inkjet, but unmistakable. It showed Axel, mid-lunge, in the hallway of the old house. Teeth bared, muscles launched. Logan, in the corner of the frame, mid-fall. And beneath the photo, scribbled in sharp black pen. "Still think it was worth it?" Logan didn't flinch. He burned the letter in a coffee can out back and didn't tell anyone. But he started carrying again, just in case. 3 nights later, the motion light near the shed flicked on at 2:13 a.m. Axel woke instantly, no bark, just movement. Logan rolled out of bed and grabbed the bedside Glock, silent. They moved as a unit, no sound, no panic. The backyard was empty, but the camera footage told a different story. A man, hooded, had stepped just inside the outer gate, stood for 11 seconds, then turned and left. Not running, watching, like he was checking to see if something had changed. It hadn't. Axel still slept near the back door. Logan still kept the cameras rolling. And the gate? Still locked from the inside with a chain. The sheriff's department opened a report. No prints, no license plate. They marked it as trespass, unknown suspect. Logan asked the deputy if it could be the second man, the one who had run off during the break-in. The deputy shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe it's someone who doesn't like that you got the whole state talking about badge fraud. Logan didn't sleep the rest of that night. Not because he was scared, because he was tired of pretending that just because the law had spoken, the danger had ended. He started going on longer walks with Axel in the mornings, not down cul-de-sacs or along neatly trimmed sidewalks, out in the woods, along trails, past rustling trees and trickling creeks, places where no one cared about mailbox height or paint colors, places where Axel didn't need to guard, just roam. And Logan realized something during those walks. Axel wasn't just a protector. He was a witness. He'd seen the moment it happened, not just the break-in, the shift, the second where Logan's quiet life collided with someone else's obsession for control, and Axel had drawn the line. One Sunday afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up the gravel driveway. An older man stepped out, gray beard, sheriff's badge clipped to his belt, clipboard in hand. Logan stepped out, eyes wary. "Mr. Reed?" the man asked. "Name's Hal, County Enforcement. I'm here to check on a new registry that flags properties with prior impersonation incidents." Logan folded his arms. "Why?" "Just making sure you're on the protected list now. Helps prioritize dispatch if something goes sideways." Axel trotted up beside Logan and sat, calm but alert. Hal nodded toward the dog. "That him?" Logan gave a slight smile. "That's Axel." The man tilted his head. "He the one who stopped that clown in the windbreaker?" Logan didn't smile. "He's the one who knew the badge was fake before I did." Hal chuckled. "Smart dog." "No," Logan said. "Trained dog." That night, Logan added a new plaque to the entryway of the house. It read simply, "Warning, retired canine on premises, no second chances." He didn't hang it to intimidate. He hung it because if someone ignored that sign, they weren't confused. They were committed, and he'd be ready. Or more accurately, Axel would. It started with a single interview clip. A podcast host asked, "What was going through your mind the second the door came down?" Logan leaned back in his chair, hands loosely clasped, Axel lying at his feet. "I wasn't thinking," he replied. "I was bracing." The host nodded. "And Axel?" Logan didn't miss a beat. He was watching, waiting, like he knew the line was about to be crossed, and once it was, there wasn't a doubt in his mind. The moment hit harder than anyone expected. That clip, barely 40 seconds, started circulating online. Within a day, it was stitched into a dozen TikToks and Instagram reels. By the end of the week, it had made its way into a veteran-focused docuseries. Axel's silent stand had turned into a statement. A four-legged sentinel who didn't need rank or command to know when something was wrong. It was never Logan's intention to become a symbol. He wasn't interested in going viral. He didn't care about interviews or shout-outs. All he wanted was a quiet life, a safe house, a good dog, and no strangers trying to force their way through his door. But the story had taken on a life of its own, because something about it resonated. Not just the intrusion, not just the fake badge or the phony law, but the silence before the bark. The moment someone trusted an animal's instinct more than their own. Requests started rolling in. News outlets, law enforcement blogs, veteran groups, even a high school civics teacher who wanted to use the story in a classroom unit about modern authority and ethical enforcement. One message stood out. It came from a woman named Carla Banks, an attorney in New Mexico who had lost her brother in a botched police impersonation 2 years earlier. She wrote, "Your dog did what our legal system couldn't. He didn't hesitate. He didn't misread the situation. He didn't wait for permission. I wish my brother had an Axel." Logan read that email twice, then forwarded it to his lawyer, James Rohr, and said, "Let's do something with this." By late spring, Logan had partnered with 2 veteran-owned nonprofits and 1 small-town sheriff's department to build out a digital campaign, Project Red Vest. Named after Axel's Crimson Canine retirement harness, the project offered free community workshops teaching civilians how to verify credentials, report fake authority figures, and, most importantly, trust their instincts when something doesn't feel right. Axel was featured as the program's symbol, not a snarling security dog, not a violent animal, but a calm, poised protector who waited until the moment truly mattered. His photo, ears forward, chest squared, wind blowing through his coat, was printed on flyers, digital posters, and training manuals across 6 states. The sheriff from Pinal County even brought Logan and Axel in for a public safety expo. It was a casual event. Food trucks, lawn chairs, kids in plastic badges running mock traffic stops with Nerf guns. But Axel sat like he was guarding the president. When a 7-year-old boy nervously asked if he could pet him, Logan nodded. "Sure thing, just approach slow. Axel reads energy." The kid crouched down, hands out, and Axel leaned forward, gave a single sniff, and gently pressed his forehead into the boy's chest. The boy's mom wiped her eyes. Logan didn't say a word. At home, life had settled into a rhythm again. The rural property was perfect. Bird song in the mornings, no streetlights at night, and a shed big enough to fit Logan's tools, backup generator, and a mini fridge stocked with Gatorade. Axel had staked out a shaded corner of the porch as his observation post. He didn't run fence lines anymore. Didn't need to, just raised his head when a new scent drifted in, or when a truck drove by too slowly. And when Logan brought out the hose to rinse the porch, Axel would lay right in the stream, eyes closed, tongue out, living his best life. One night, Logan invited a small group of friends and neighbors over for a cookout. Nothing fancy, just burgers, corn on the cob, beer, and one giant tomahawk steak for Axel. The conversation eventually turned, as it always did, to that day. Someone asked, "Would you have handled it differently if Axel wasn't there?" Logan thought about it for a moment. "I probably would have tried to reason with them," he said, "or gotten hurt trying." He paused. "But I also think I might have talked myself out of trusting what I felt. That something was wrong." He glanced at Axel, who was now dozing near the fire pit. He didn't second guess, he didn't analyze, he just acted. There was a quiet respect around the fire after that. Not just for Axel, but for the idea that sometimes instinct is the best kind of intelligence. Later that month, Logan received a letter from the state attorney general's office. After reviewing the court case and the HOA's internal communications, the state was opening a broader investigation into unauthorized community enforcement, not just in Whisper Pines, but statewide. The letter included phrases like systemic overreach, private security impersonation, and civil liberty violations. Logan folded the letter neatly and tucked it into a file labeled accountability. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt resolved. Because it was never about revenge. It was about what could have happened next time. To someone without cameras, without a voice, without a dog. Then came the call from a National Canine Retirement Foundation. They'd heard Axel's story and wanted to feature him in a tribute series. It would honor working dogs who'd transitioned into civilian life, but still stood the line when it mattered most. Logan said yes. The crew showed up 2 weeks later, just 2 people, a camera, and a boom mic. They asked Logan the same questions he'd answered before, but this time they ended with something different. "If Axel could understand you perfectly," the interviewer asked, "what would you say to him right now?" Logan looked down at his dog. Older now, more gray around the muzzle, but still sitting tall. He smiled. "I'd say, I never trained you to be this good. I was just lucky enough to be yours." Axel, as if on cue, leaned his weight into Logan's leg. The feature aired on a Sunday night. Footage of Axel trotting beside Logan in the woods. Clips of the courtroom verdict. Slow pans over the new plaque above the door. "Retired canine on premises, no second chances." It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud, but it struck something in people. Because for once, the story of a dog wasn't about tragedy. It was about timing, judgment, and staying calm until it counts. The porch creaked as Logan settled into his old wooden chair, a steaming mug of black coffee warming his hands. Axel lay just a few feet away, his back to the door, facing the gravel road as he always did. He wasn't tense. He wasn't alert. But he was aware. Still. Always. Dawn broke in slivers through the trees, painting everything in soft gold. A squirrel darted across the lawn. A bird chirped once and flew off. Logan took a slow sip and exhaled. Peace wasn't something he chased anymore. It was something he protected. And no one guarded it better than the dog who chose silence over show and loyalty over hesitation. It had been nearly a year since the break-in. A year since 2 men had walked through a door they weren't invited through. A year since Axel had stood in that hallway and decided that enough was enough. So much had changed. The shed behind the house was now a proper workshop. The crew had 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to learn, 2 weeks to grow. 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 2 weeks to learn, Logan used it to build furniture and teach occasional vet rehab classes to local kids interested in training service dogs. The front gate had a keypad now. The house had reinforced locks, cameras, floodlights, every precaution money could buy. But none of those things gave Logan comfort the way Axel did. It wasn't just protection, it was presence. There were quiet moments, long ones, when Logan would watch Axel and wonder how much the dog remembered. The hallway, the shove, the scream, the blood. He'd never know for sure. But sometimes, when a car slowed a little too long in front of the gate, Axel's ears would twitch just slightly. And that was all Logan needed. One quiet signal that said, "I'm still watching." The story had faded from the public eye, as they always do. The podcast clips had stopped circulating. The social media reposts slowed. The "Retired Canine Saves Owner" headline was buried beneath newer, flashier news. But the impact, it stayed. Logan still got the occasional email, usually from someone who'd seen the documentary or read a safety pamphlet printed with Axel's face. "My dad bought a door camera after seeing your story. We filed a complaint with our HOA because we recognized the same badge. Your dog made us realize we weren't paranoid, we were just early." Each time Logan read one, he felt the same mix of humility and quiet pride. Because for all the noise the world made, Axel had never barked to be heard. He acted because it mattered. One summer morning, Logan and Axel were invited to speak at a statewide public safety conference in Flagstaff. Logan hadn't planned to go, but a local sheriff who had supported Project Red Vest reached out personally and said, "People need to see what accountability looks like with a heartbeat." So Logan put on a sport coat, packed some jerky in his glove compartment, and made the drive with Axel in the back seat, head out the window like a big-eared eagle. The crowd wasn't massive, but the room was full. Logan stood behind a podium that felt too big and told the story, not in dramatic detail, not with courtroom drama, but plainly. What happened, what nearly happened, and what Axel did when no one else had time to think. There was silence when he finished. Then applause, not thunderous, but steady, real. Afterward, a firefighter in his 60s approached, shook Logan's hand, and crouched to pet Axel. "I've worked with a lot of dogs," the man said, "but this one, he knew who he was protecting." Logan nodded. "He always does." As the seasons passed, Axel began to slow. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the subtle ways that loyal companions age. His joints were stiffer in the mornings. His naps stretched longer into the afternoon. He stopped sprinting to the fence when deer passed, and instead just watched them through the trees with unbothered eyes. Logan added a padded mat by the fireplace and installed a ramp on the front steps. Axel didn't complain. He simply adapted, because that's what he always did. One cool October morning, Logan stepped out onto the porch and sat in silence. The air smelled of pine and old firewood. A crow squawked from a distant branch, and beside him, Axel didn't move. Not at first, but then he raised his head just slightly and let out a quiet exhale. Logan reached down and rested his hand on the dog's back. "You've done your job," he said softly. "Better than I ever deserved." Axel blinked once, and that was enough. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Logan opened a small wooden box he'd built by hand and laid inside a red canine harness. It wasn't a trophy. It wasn't a statement. It was a reminder that sometimes the most heroic things don't come with sirens or medals or fanfare. Sometimes they come with quiet steps, steady eyes, and one moment of perfect clarity. Weeks passed. Life went on. And then one day a package arrived at Logan's mailbox. No return address. Just a small brass plaque inside and a note. For Axel, the one who saw through the uniform, the story, and the lie, and chose the truth. Logan installed the plaque beside the workshop door. It read, "Here walked a dog who knew the difference between power and purpose." Now, whenever visitors asked about the break-in, or the lawsuit, or why Logan still kept that old splintered door panel nailed up on the garage wall, he didn't tell them the whole story. He pointed to the plaque. Then to the mat where Axel still liked to lie, tail swaying lazily, and said, "He did what no badge ever could. He waited for the moment, then acted." Thank you for following Axel's story. His journey wasn't about violence. It wasn't about lawsuits or headlines. It was about trust, how fast it can break, and how strong it can be when earned. Axel never barked to get attention. He barked when it mattered. And maybe that's the kind of wisdom we all need more of. So let us ask you this. Have you ever had a moment where you had to trust your gut, even when no one else saw the danger? We'd love to hear your story, because courage doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears fur.